Okay, we're going to finish off this series by talking about how to bring in our model and export our texture maps from Zbrush. Here I have this set up in RenderMan. The left-hand version of my model, this is the actual model, so this is the high-res version. And on the right-hand side is the low-res version, but with my texture maps on it. So if you come out in here, you can see this is low-res, this is the high-res, and this is what they look like. I like to do this, or a version of this, just so I can kind of compare and make sure I'm getting the detail I need. Not every setup using this workflow is going to be perfect, right? Like there's going to be some instances where certain texture or certain details are lost because the model and the displacement map alone can't support it, or we just have to represent it a different way or take a different approach. But for the most part, I am pretty happy with these results. I think these are good enough, and so I'm going to kind of work from here. So we're going to go ahead and take this into Zbrush, and we're going to look at the export settings. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this render. I'm going to minimize this. I'll come in here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start from scratch, so I'll go ahead and close that. So here I have my model. Again, this has, oh, this is a different one. Sorry. This one has, and let's solo this, the low res to the high res. I'm going to go up to here. So in order to export our texture maps, there's a bunch of exporters in here for different texture maps. There's displacement map, normal map, texture map, etc. But Zbrush has this essentially what's called a multi-map exporter right here, which is just a collection of all those exporters into one location. I'm going to click on this little button right here, which is going to dock this over into one of the sides, either here or over here. And I'm just going to be exporting my map as a displacement and a normal map. So your thing should look something like this. We're going to do displacement map and normal map. And we're going to go ahead and open up the export options. We're going to make sure we are exporting out of the map size we want, 2K or 4K. Always keep the flip V on for the most part. We also can change our file name, so we'll click on this, we go file names. For this, I'm going to keep my my formats for 16-bit and 8-bit images as TIFFs. I'm going to choose override existing files in my case, and while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and delete the existing texture maps for now. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those. Okay. And then this is just a naming convention it's going to use. So you'll see it uses -dm for displacement, -vd for vector displacement, -nm for normal map. So if you like that, that's cool. If you're going to be using UDIM tiles, then just make sure this naming convention matches the way you want it to be. In this case, I'm not using UDIM tiles, so I'm just going to leave it to its default. And then when we're done, we'll say OK. And all right, so we're going to come down here to the displacement map and normal map. So we'll start with displacement map. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have this set to subdivision level 1, because that's the model we're using, is the subdivision level 1 model. That's the one that we're bringing into Maya or whatever the program we're looking at. And this is essentially saying take the highest resolution subdivision level and compare it to subdivision level 1 in this case, and generate a texture map that creates the details between subdivision level, in this case 5 and 1. And so it's going to generate a texture map that has that detail. I'm going to make sure my displacement value is set to 0.5. That's just because I'm going to be using an 8-bit or a 16-bit image. If I wanted to use like a more advanced displacement map with like a lot more detail and information, I might set this to 0 and set it to 32-bit, so that I have a better range or greater range. And so when I export the map, then it's going to give negative values for pushing in and positive values for pushing out, and the mid value is going to be 0. In my case, it's just going to be a grayscale map, and it's going to go from 0 to 1 instead. I'm not going to mess with scale and intensity, but you can click on Get Scale. This is going to give you a size-accurate displacement scale for your texture map, and so you can load this in without having to fool around with the scale value or the gain value inside of RenderMan or whatever render you're using. But in this case, we're not going to fiddle around with that too much. I'm not going to be exporting out multiple channels. I'm just going to make sure I have adaptive mode. Adaptive mode is going to go slower, but it's going to give you more accurate image displacement map. So if your baker is going slow, so if it bakes really, really slow, you might want to consider turning that off to speed up your workflow, especially if you're just testing and trying to see if the settings are working well. So I just have adaptive mid-value 0.5, and I didn't really have to change anything else for displacement. Under my normal map, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've set this to tangent, because it's going to be a tangent-space normal map, like a normal map. Again, I'm going to do adaptive. I'm going to do smooth low-res normals. That's going to depend on how your UVs or your normals look at low res, right? If it comes in with smooth normals, then you won't have to do this. Or your normals are smoothed in Maya or whatever other program you're looking at, but in my case they're not smoothed. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn that on, so it's going to smooth my normals and then export the texture map. So if you load on your normal map inside of your renderer and you're seeing faceting, just toggle this on or off depending on what it was originally set to. And that's the same thing, I just have subdivision level 1. You might have to flip the green channel depending on where you're taking this. If you're taking this into like Unreal Engine, you might need to flip that. Depends on if you're doing OpenGL or DirectX, but in this case I'm just going to leave it off. And I'm going to go ahead and now that I've set my normal map and displacement settings, I'm going to go ahead and click on Export Create All Maps. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in that folder. So on my desktop or my downloads folder, I have this texture maps folder. I'm just going to go ahead and call it Plank A. We'll get rid of this part right here and say save. And you'll see it's going to start calculating and processing these images. And once it says maps created and exported, click on that. And now what I'll do is I'll come over into my downloads folder. And you can see it's gone ahead and named these. This is kind of an annoying thing about the way ZBrush likes to name these files, is it uses that name I set and then the name of the model and then dash that. So it's a little annoying, but we can come in and clean that up. Another thing to keep in mind is the displacement map is actually going to use it's going to put in a scale value here. So I'm going to come in here and rename this because that can sometimes get in the way of, let's see, there's rename. That can get in the way of our UDIM. If you're using like a UDIM workflow and it's looking up the UV tile number, that can get in the way. So we're just going to get rid of that. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you my setup in here. So I've just gone ahead and I've loaded in a Pixar displacement node, attached it to a Pixar surface. I went ahead and put on a transform node and plugged it into the scaler. So I'm just taking the result float, put it into the displacement scaler. I'm making sure my remapping mode is centered because those values I'm using in the displacement export, so we'll come in down here, displacement map is set to 0.5 for the mid value. So that's centered, so that means we need to do centered at 0.5. And then here's my texture map, I'm loading it in. I'm not going to linearize it if I'm in linear sRGB, you don't want to do that. And if you're in ACES, you want to check inside of your texture map manager that it's not color correcting. You want it to be left at data and not doing sRGB. So just keep that in mind if your displacement map doesn't look right. But what I like to do is, you can see I'm bringing this gain value low because I didn't have that scale value set, right? I didn't go through and I was setting that scale for the export. So it's coming out and it's not thinking about the scale of the object. So I have to dial this in. That's kind of how I personally like to work, but not super accurate. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to disable the normal map. I have a normal map on here too. So I'm going to just disable this for now and set that to 0. And what I like to do is here we're going to go ahead and let's pull this there for now. So we'll just go ahead and put that right there. I'm going to go ahead and start an IPR. And we're going to go ahead and put this over here. And so we're going to pull this right there. And by default, that displacement, if I set it to 1, it's going to be kind of insane, right? It's going to be way too large. We'll bring it down to like 0.2. You can see that's still humongous. Again, this is where that scale is an issue. So if I don't set the scale, usually just related to RenderMan, I usually have to bring it down to something like 0.002 or 0.001. So in this case, I'm going down to 0.002. And my texture map's not currently being loaded because I actually have to replace this. I had to stop for a second and be like, what is going on? So I'll click on open. At first, it's going to go a little wild, so we'll come over here to, you can see you're going to have that RenderMan pattern on there. But once it does that, you can see it's actually getting pretty dang close to the original. You can see it's a little too crunchy, so I'm just going to bring this down to 0.0015 maybe, or actually that's pretty close. But I'll do 0.002. And so then that's usually good enough. If you want a little extra detail, because especially if you don't have a lot of there's like little tiny forms that aren't quite sharp. You can see it gets a little soft right there. What we can do is we can use our normal map to enhance our details. We don't want to turn them both on fully. We want to, if you're using displacement, I like to let the displacement map drive more of the information. And what I did in ZBrush is what I could have done is I could have had the normal map export detail information from like subdivision level 3 to 5. So that means it's only capturing the really high resolution or like the really fine detail and not the big form changes. So I can let the displacement map handle at subdivision level 1 to 5. It's going to get those really big form changes, and then letting it go from subdivision level 3 to 5 for the really detailed information for the normal map. So that way they're capturing slightly different information. But in my case, I didn't go through that process. I just submitted also the normal map out from 1 to 5. So I'll come over here to in here, and I'm going to grab that normal map. I'm going to load it in. So you can see I'm just loading it in here. Let's go ahead and make sure we're grabbing that normal map. I'm going to go ahead and stop the render for now. Something about displacement maps, if you're using IPR and RenderMan, specific to RenderMan, you might have to restart IPR multiple times. And before we move on to the normal map, you might be noticing, hey, this is like my model doesn't look like that. Mine looks really weird. On mine, I also had to select my mesh, and I had to come over here to the shape node, go down to RenderMan, and go to displacement, or sorry, down underneath RenderMan, down under subdivision scheme. I turned on Catmull-Clark subdivision scheme, and then I also turned water dicing to yes. And so that's just going to make it, subdivision scheme is going to subdivide my model when at render time, and then the watertight dicing is going to prevent cracking. So it just makes sure if your mesh is like, oh, it didn't turn out right, it didn't look like as nice as Caleb's. That might be what you have to do in order to have enough topology and resolution to work with. So I'm going to come back over here to the normal map, and by default it's going to be scale 1, and I'm going to go ahead and IPR it. You're going to see it's going to look a little too crunchy or a little too like baked, and so that's just because both the displacement map and the normal map are kind of capturing the same detail, so it's like doubling the information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dial this normal map node down until it's just really enhancing the details, right? You can see there's just a little subtle form change or edge enhancement change going on there. So I'm just using that normal map to get a little extra crispness on any of those small details. But for the most part, that's all I really need to do, right? I'm loading in both the displacement and normal map. I do the displacement map first and then do the normal map second, and I'll use the normal map to enhance after the displacement map's all figured out. You usually have to bring the gain on the displacement map down low. I make sure I have a displacement transform node that is centered and set to displacement center 0.5. You see I have this comparison model. I'm going to show you how I got this comparison model for finishing this off. So you can see this is going to be, let's go ahead and go, I guess we can't go see it that much. You can see this is like a weird mesh, right? It's kind of like really triangulated. This is called a decimated mesh, so I can get this to be, because my high-res mesh is like maybe 1 million polygons or something like that. So let's go ahead and stop this render. I use the decimated version, which is going to give me all my detail, but with a really bad topology and lower poly count. So I'm going to come in here, and I made a duplicate of my mesh. So here's my original mesh. So here, with this nice topology, right, and subdivision levels, I made a duplicate, and you can see I decimated it, which looks really gross. So I'm going to go through that process right here really quickly. So what I did is I duplicated my mesh, and I went to its highest subdivision level. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and come into my Z plugin panel. And again, I'm docking it over here. And I'm going to go ahead and go to Decimation Master. So we're going to click on this Decimation Master. We're going to click on Preprocess Current Subtool. And it's going to think about it. Depending on how high-res our mesh is, this might take a really long time. And once it's done, it says operation completed. Now I'm going to set the what percentage of polygons I want left over. So this is about 600,000. So I'm going to go ahead and do 10%, and we're going to click on Decimate Current. And it didn't quite bring it down to 10%, right? But it got close. So I'm going to now it's down to 123%. And if you look up close, you'll see on the surface, it's kind of hard to see, but you'll actually start to see that those triangles show up. But if from far away you don't notice it, then it's good enough, right? So what we can do is I can now export this, and you want to get it down to until your computer can handle it in Maya. I'll do export. I'm going to put it in my downloads folder, and we're going to do, I'm going to call it decimated, save, yep. And then what I can do is I just imported it in and then offset it and moved it over and gave it a similar material as this one so I can compare them. And I just like doing this so I can see inside of my renderer if my my displacement maps and my normal maps are looking correct or looking good. And then once you've done this process and you have a good workflow down, you know all the settings, you won't have to do that decimation export. The one good thing that is nice about the decimation export is I can use that decimation as a high-res target inside of Substance Painter. So if I come into Substance Painter, we're going to go ahead and open that up. Okay, so I just started a new file. I went ahead and imported my low-res mesh. I could, when I imported it, add in my normal map. We don't need the displacement map, but we're going to get the normal map, so I'm going to add resource. So we're going to go ahead and add texture map. Let's add in a normal map, say open, and we're going to do texture, current session, say import. And then inside my texture set settings, I'll bake my mesh maps, but I'm going to go ahead and select, drag this into the normal map. So we can go here. And in this case, you can see it's not looking great right now, so I probably have to export this out as a smooth version with smooth normals, so hold on. And here it is. I went ahead and smoothed the normals on my mesh. You can see this doesn't look great inside of Substance Painter. So I might let it go ahead and bake its own normal map, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the baker, and for the high-res mesh, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Decimated model. And we're going to make sure this is at 2K or 4K. I'm going to do 4K for myself. And we're going to go ahead and, oh, they bake out height. I did not know that. Let's try that. And I'm going to go ahead and bake selected textures and just go ahead and let it bake out that decimated mesh as my high poly target against my low res mesh. We're going to let that go. And once we're done, return to painting mode. You see that normal map's way better than the one that I brought in. I think it just isn't optimized or ready for Substance Painter. But if in this case, we might also want to go ahead and export. We could use the normal map from Substance Painter instead of from Zbrush. But you can see now I have mesh maps. So I'm just going to look through my mesh maps. So we have an ambient occlusion, we have a curvature map, we have position, thickness, we have a height map. Oh, cool. I wonder if I get rid of the height map, I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay, that didn't do anything. Okay. And so I can go ahead and just go in and add a smart mask. Let's do one of these, or smart materials. So we'll do something like steel painted scraped. And now it has all that edge detection information. So getting that decimated mesh is going to be able to give me a high poly target to make those mesh maps, which are going to really enable all of the interesting stuff that Substance Painter can do. So that's why we really want that. So that's pretty much the end of this. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about this workflow, please let me know, and I'll hopefully be able to make more videos in the future.